There's certain conversations that I really look forward to. And this one with Jordan Spieth was one of those. Jordan, thanks for joining me. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. You doing all right?
I'm doing fine. Wintry, looking forward to Torrey Pines, but just great to have you on. So I know you're a dad right now, and there's lots of dad stuff going on. So let's get to it, shall we? You need no introduction, but I want to take you back to the start. A young kid growing up in Dallas, um, lefty, right? How do you get into golf first off? Because you were quite the athlete as a kid as well.
Yeah, both my parents played Division One college sports. My mom played basketball and my dad played baseball. So I have a brother that's 18 months younger than me, and we just grew up with a ball in our hand. So we were playing basketball, baseball, soccer, football. Golf ended up being something that I took up around when my brother was born as just a kind of an activity to keep myself. And now having a 2-year old, I understand what my parents meant when they said, we just needed a little bit of time to ourselves. So just like Sammy has a couple golf clubs out in the backyard, I guess that was how I got started in it. And then baseball was kind of my love growing up.
Mhm.
Um, and I played baseball and basketball into the till high school. And it wasn't until I was really 13 years old, 12, 13 years old, where I fell in love with golf, loved working at it, did more than just a tournament here or there, and started actually wanting to go to the course every single day. Um,
That begs a question because you're a dad now too, and you referenced Sammy and the golf clubs. I'm a parent. I have two daughters. Both athletic. The one showing some proficiency for golf, but she got started later. Um, that moment, was there a moment where you're like, okay, golf is kind of for me? Can you think back and recall, revisit that?
yeah, I think maybe when I said 13, I had broken 70 in a tournament when I was 11. That was the first time I broke 70 in a tournament.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of hard not to think maybe we got some potential here at that stage, but I wasn't a top ranked in the state or until I was probably 13 or 14. So, there were players that were better that started at 6, 7 years old, and that's the way I see a lot of it going now. I mean, I go out to the course and there's 6, 7 year olds just hitting balls on the range and they're having fun and they're being kids, but it's like, man, I don't remember doing that at that age. But
Probably trying to be
I,
like Jordan Spieth, huh?
yeah, or just yeah, whoever their guy is now. Um, but I think I could probably pinpoint that, but I was still kind of just playing, NTPGA junior events here. I wasn't tested against anybody outside, the Texas or Oklahoma essentially, and it's certainly nationally until I was really 13 in the AJGA, the American Junior Golf Association opens you up into being competitive against juniors from really around the world, but especially around the country. So I would say, I played in the Starburst Junior, which is a really popular Texas junior golf tournament in Waco every year. And when I was 12, I played in my age group and I shot 63, finishing 8 under on the last eight. And so I was 12. And at that time, I was like, wow, this is actually pretty fun. So
Uh,
maybe I should keep doing this. Um, and so between kind of that, it was sometime in that, it's hard to think back that far now. That's 18 years ago. But I just remember what was so cool about it was I felt like I went to the course. I felt like I was getting better. I was having fun doing so. We were playing, I was dropped off at 8:30 in the morning. I would hit some balls. We'd go play 18, then we'd go play some basketball. We'd go play some football in the parking lot. We'd go back, eat lunch, hit some more balls, go play again. I was like, man, I'm having a lot of fun these days. I got a good group of juniors I'm with and um, starting to really enjoy having the ball in my hand.
yeah.
I think I've spoken to that before is like when I played other sports, somebody was better on the team and they always got the last shot.
Okay.
And in golf, it was all on you. And that's what I loved.
That's awesome. I want to ask you this too, because you talk about the other sports. It seems to me, and obviously this is true on the PGA Tour, that even though kids are coming up in the game, it's you got to be athletic first. I'm assuming you would concur because that's who you are, huh?
I believe so. I think that that's how the sport's gotten more competitive now. Even in the tenure I've had, it seems like there's more athletes choosing golf than there were even 12 years ago, and especially 20, 25 years ago, from what I hear. So, I mean, it would be what I would advise, but that's just because that's the way I came up and I enjoyed doing that. But, you know, Tiger didn't do that, and he's done fine for himself. So it's a little, it's kind of, there's no one way.
Mhm.
But for me, I just thought it was a better way to just become an all around individual, was sport and being part of a team, and then finding out what you love to do. I wasn't pressured to do anything really. I was just given opportunities
Yeah.
and to find out what I love to do, and it happened to be golf.
That's awesome. I'd want to ask you what it was like to parent Jordan Spieth, but I'm not going to do that because I feel like I know the answer. Because, my interactions with you, and I'm digressing a little bit here. The one thing, if people had to say to me, describe Jordan, I'd be like, he is true to himself. He knows where he's going. And when I see you, and I'm hearing this from you now, when I see you in competition and you get a sniff of the lead, I can see the inner athlete, the competitor come out. Am I correct in my assessment here?
Yeah, I think yeah, that's what excites me. At the same time, sometimes maybe too much excitement, and I can get away from standard stuff and create I've had plenty of scenarios where I've made it look easy, and I've had some where I've made it look really hard. So, but that's golf. But yeah, I think I just start getting so giddy when I get towards the top because your confidence is there, and all of a sudden you're now competing, and it's a 4 day stint, and you're not always competing from the get go. So if you start working your way up there Friday, Saturday, it's all of a sudden Sunday comes, and you just prepared the whole week just to try to get to that position, and it doesn't happen every week, and so it can be very, very exciting.
Look, obviously you were a decorated amateur, two-time US junior champion, a la Tiger Woods. But then as a 16-year-old, and I was just getting into broadcast back then, you get invited to play on the Byron Nelson. And you're 16, fresh high schooler, buddy on the bag there caddying, and you're inside the top 10 Saturday afternoon, and there are TV cameras all over you. And I just want to know, here's Jordan Spieth, 16-year-old, obviously talented, in his hometown back on. There's got to be pressure. I mean, talk to me about the feelings of going through all that stuff, man.
I think I, I think I remember the pressure being more that my first tee shot, there was a
Okay.
big rain delay. I was
Mhm.
teeing off on number 10 in the afternoon, and I don't think I teed off till around 5 p.m. because of I was one of the last groups being on a sponsor exemption, and sorry, my dog's here.
Very
But
cool. It's adding to the
yeah,
conversation.
yeah, yeah. But I remember teeing off on that 10th hole and being just super nervous to get going. But I think by the time Saturday hit, I was just I was just excited. I didn't feel like it was anywhere I shouldn't be. I was wondering kind of how I was going to get started, and that was really it. Once I was going to kind of get through the first couple holes, really, um, 2 and 3 are a meaty part of that golf course. And I was kind of thinking of it like once you get through here, 2 and 3, then there's a lot of opportunities, and I settled in, and it was certainly more than I probably thought I was going to get out of it, but I guess I wouldn't say I was surprised, but I would say, you know, I, I guess I think I was like, man, okay, I really can do this. That was kind of the first moment where I was like, I not only do I feel like I can get better and play out here, considering that was kind of the only chance I had at the time. I wanted to, right? And that's what it comes down to. Like I didn't feel like it was something that would burn me out. I felt like
Uh-huh.
this is I feel like I can, and I feel like I want to, and that's a big driving force. It's confident, but then it's also makes me. I mean, I guarantee you that next day I was out practicing again because it was so exciting, and I was 16, so who needs recovery?
Yeah, well, look, you signaled to the rest of the world who you were and you introduced yourself and it was a preamble, a harbinger to what was coming. I'm going to fast forward past Texas. You go there for a year, win a national championship, turn pro early. And you make a splash right away. You're contending. kind of doing what everyone is expecting you to. Inside, I'm wanting to ask you about expectations, but first, I want to go to the John Deere Classic. You've been in contention, you've been in the mix some, you're obviously used to it to a certain extent, even in your opening season. But then that bunker shot in that sudden death playoff. Look, the 18th hole, for the folks who don't know it, is riddled with disaster. Down the left-hand side, there's water. The bunker on the right's not the happiest spot in the world. And yes, Jordan Spieth against Zach Johnson, and I think David Hearn was the other one in the playoff. And you hole a freaking bunker shot to win. Okay. And that wasn't very easy at all. But to me, as I watched the footage back, I was like, it's like you were made for that shot. Revisit that with me, please, because to me, it's one of the great. You had countless great shots, but that one was incredible as a young man coming out.
Yeah, I think I was, as you mentioned, I had contended quite a bit, so I didn't feel like it was one. The reason I say that is I found myself in the bunker on the 18th hole, still somewhere around one back or maybe two back. I was three or four groups in front of the last group.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Summerhays was leading, and going into the final round, and then Zach was there and David Hearn. And so I found myself in that bunker, and honestly, there was just no point in trying to make par, because I knew that if I make par, I have no chance of winning. Winning is all that mattered to me at that point, considering, I'd already played well. The only way to actually get full status away from my temporary membership was to win.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess when I went into it, it came off hotter than I maybe intended to. And so it took a bounce up the stick, and certainly fortunate, because I've had a number of shots, bounce up off flag sticks, and with that kind of spin, they actually end up further away than they may have been, or if they doesn't hit the stick, it's heading towards right towards that creek. It wasn't a miss, it wasn't like bladed by any means, but it certainly flew further than I wanted to. I was trying to hit kind of a one hop stop roll in, and but the point is it was going to get to the hole because there was no reason for it not to, and I luckily approached that. Most of my shots I hit around the greens that way. It doesn't have a chance to get stopped or go in if it doesn't get there. So certainly pretty lucky to get into the playoff, but it was a cool shot. And then I got lucky. Not only did that go in, Zach Johnson bogeyed the 72nd hole. We went to a 5-hole playoff. David Hearn had a look inside 5 feet to win. And I hit a shot in the playoff hole that I ended up winning on number 18, our 5th hole. I punched a 7-iron out of the trees and kind of cut it off the water and ran it up to the back of the green when the other two were in trouble. And what's really interesting is a lot of the focus ends up on the bunker shot of that tournament.
Yeah.
And but to me, it was like, I remember hitting that punch 7-iron, and now I'm thinking, why was that such an easy shot for me then? Like I'm sitting here going, man, like, all right, just a little punch 7-iron, cut off the bunker or cut off the water, split the water in the bunker and run it up the green. Like I can see the shot.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, oh yeah, I'll just hit the punch cut 7-iron up the green. And I'm sitting here now like,
geez, that's hard.
Why was that the only thing I was thinking there? And how do I get to where I can just think that way again?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just kind of funny. It was so simple. It was just it's your normal punch shot.
Yeah, look, yes, obviously you hold in regulation, and then one after the extended playoff. That shot was incredible. I do want to go back to the bunker shot though, because you're in a bunker, there's water on the other side, green tilts away from you, and you made a statement that I don't want people to lose in the wash. Where you're like, I've always approached short game shots where if the ball doesn't get to the hole, it's not going in, which is kind of, people should just pause and really ease that into their soul. You in there over the bunker. Now I want to talk about, because I get the sense that you almost will balls into the hole at times, but they're a bunker shot. I'm expecting you had to hit pretty close to it. So there was an element of freedom and aggression to the thing, I guess is what I'm saying. Am I right?
Yeah, no, that's kind of what I was alluding to is there's nothing but freedom and aggression into the shot, given whether it's like I just mentioned about the 7-iron, that's just the way I was thinking, or, the idea that, I didn't have to finish, say in Tampa earlier that year, I knew that if I finished with a birdie par on the last two, I get status, so I get unlimited exemption. So it's like you're trying to hit a certain number versus
Yeah.
I'm trying to win. If I don't win, then I don't care. And that was kind of where, once I had that status, the only thing that could benefit me in the last 3 weeks of the season was if I won a golf tournament. Other than that, there was almost no benefit to my status or what the potential could have been through the rest of the fall.
Mhm.
So I wasn't thinking about that actively over the bunker shot, but that went into how I was playing every single round at the time.
Got you. I want to stay with the short game some because I've described you when you first came out. I called you the American Seve because as a young man, I was lucky enough to get to watch Seve from close. And that is the ultimate compliment I can give someone because you seem like a magician with a wedge in your hand. And I want to say to so many aspirant golfers, I'm like, go and watch Spieth because you are creative. You're not handcuffed by technique. It doesn't look like it looks like a guy with a club and a ball, and you're just trying to spin this thing into the hole. Talk to us a little bit about how you approach your craft, please.
Yeah, I think part of it's just where I had to learn the short game, and I'll explain that in a second. And the other part is being advised by my instructor, Cameron McCormick, that's like, chipping is not the full swing at all. You're doing completely different motions. You're changing full planes of motion depending on contact, certain lies, how quickly you need to stop it, where the ball's located, bunker, rough, fairway. Like they all have completely different, could have completely different motions depending on what's presented. So the idea that you would practice something you're doing on your full swing is not correct unless it's a basic shot from 30 plus yards that you'd hit like you'd hit a full shot. And we just don't experience that very much around the greens. Something the green's elevated, well, that changes it. And so growing up at Brookhaven Country Club, which has a great facility now, but when I was learning the game, their short game area consisted of one bunker, some rough, and a very, very firm, fast, small sloping AstroTurf green.
Okay, right.
So it was turf. And so I had to learn how to spin the ball incredibly just to keep it on this chipping green, as well as learning how to hit shots really high out of the rough, being okay with putting speed under the ball with a lot of loft. Just ways to keep it. Honestly, it was just very hard to keep it on the green that I learned how to practice on. And so I learned how to play bunker shots hitting very close to the ball. And that's how I still do it to this day. I have almost no bounce on my 60-degree wedge. And it doesn't affect me if I'm in a bunker at the Open Championship or if I'm at Colonial, which are the two extremes of sand traps that we experience. One's incredibly firm and the other, the ball's never going to sit up in the Open. But regardless, if I'm controlling my entry point and my entry point remains consistent, now I have distance control regardless of the sand. And then that very little bounce allows me to make up for some shots that would be more difficult. Because the one thing that's a challenge with very, very low bounce is if you get, Kikuya, where the ball's sitting up really high because it can dig, or very thick bunkers. People don't like low bounce. But if I'm the way I chip, which is more kind of cover cut on a basic chip, and the way that I hit bunker shots, which is control your entry point very close to the ball, it kind of doesn't matter then. And so it creates an advantage of having the same wedge everywhere I play. And then as I move to some very difficult shots sometimes into the green, Bermuda, stuff like that very low bounce wedge gives me an advantage over guys who aren't playing it.
That speaks to what I was saying, where you're just so true to who you are. Because, at one stage when I was teaching full time on tour, if I heard the term expose the bounce once more, I would have vomited because everyone was trying to. But then I see you show up there with a weaker grip. You're not afraid of turning that front edge of that wedge down whatsoever. And like I say, you're a symphony around the greens.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly hard for me to give any advice to anybody in a pro-am because unless you go do it and just get comfortable doing it. And what I mean by doing it is that cover cut motion that you're going to hit ball first and you're going to take a divot, even if it's a 10-yard shot, you're going to go ahead and be aggressive into the ball. A lot of times what we experience is we can't get height on a chip out of the fairway. It's just not going to be possible unless you expose the bounce and hit it fat on purpose. And then it's just very hard to actually control how much turf you're getting and how far the ball's actually going to fly. So I try to make up for it with spin. by hitting ball first and being very aggressive into the ground.
Yeah.
And the cutting motion allows me to, make sure that swing direction is significantly to the left, making it a little bit easier to make sure I'm hitting ball first. I can open the face up. The club still sits with very little bounce behind the ball. That either can allow for a little more height, a little more spin, or both. So I have that option. But there's a lot of times that you just have to accept the fact that you can't lift it up in the air when you're chipping.
Yeah.
And once you get comfortable being more aggressive than you want to be into the ball, really from any surface, any lie, it actually makes chipping quite a bit easier. But you have to almost get uncomfortable to be comfortable, if that makes sense. You just got to do it enough to start to believe in it.
Yeah, there's another statement I want folks to clip and replay. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. Let's move along. 2015 is obviously a banner season for you.
Wait, hold on 1 second. 1 second.
Okay.
Sorry. Daughters. Parenting.
It's a game changer, isn't it?
Yeah. She'll
So for the audio listeners, if you tune onto YouTube, you can see Jordan and his very cute Labrador, looks like black one.
Yeah.
And now he's doing parenting stuff. So 15 is just one of those years, and you had run close in the Masters the year before. And then you get there to Augusta National. You had played well leading in, and you just blitz the field. You break the scoring record after 3 rounds. You kind of cantered to the win. My question to you is this, Jordan. Is that the best golf you've ever played? Were you kind of in that zone that week over there?
I think that month was some of the best golf I've ever played. I finished second in San Antonio, followed it up with a loss in a playoff in Houston, and then won at Augusta. It was just a continuation of tightening things up from what was already really good the previous 2 weeks, and regardless of where I was going to be at. And I just tried to use the year before as a learning tool. I needed a little more patience on Sunday. I needed to hole a few more putts. I had a few decent looks against Bubba that could have put pressure on in 14 that I missed on the par 5s. And I thought, keep your head down, because just because you have the lead through 7 or 8 holes on Sunday at Augusta doesn't mean you won't lose it by number 10, which is what happened in 14.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just kind of kept me, I think, very patient that year to continue it into the back 9, to not even think that anything that not look ahead until I got to really 17 green. 16, I made a big putt to avoid a 2-shot swing with Justin Rose. And I think the best golf I ever played was actually Tiger's event about 6 months prior.
Yeah.
5 months prior.
That was at Isleworth, wasn't it?
That was at Isleworth. That's probably the best single week of golf I've ever played. I had the ball on a string. I was putting great. Between there and then in Hawaii in early 2016, those are the 2 where I separated from a field and didn't think twice about it. But hard to put a stretch of a month any better than that kind of spring of 15.
Talk to me about, please. The challenge of playing Augusta National is there's not a level spot on the golf course except for the teeing grounds. And I've heard you say that it sort of awakens the creative streak inside, because it makes you see shots and hit shots and not necessarily play golf swing some. So talk to the listener and me about seeing the wide line, because that's kind of one of the keys around there. Whereas you got to allow gravity to do its thing. That to me it's a skill, but I think it can be learned. What say you?
I think that it's something that is a fault of mine at other places. A lot of times I pick too much curve.
Okay.
And the lies are so flat that in order to create a spin axis that gets the ball all the way to the hole, it's something I'm not necessarily doing on the driving range when I'm hitting tighter curves. Okay. But at Augusta, it does it for you. So you actually play a tighter curve off lining up wider, and the hill will throw it more. You got to fight the hill on a certain shot. On number 9, you got to hook it off the ball below your feet. That's what I mean when I say the feel aspect comes out. It actually kind of plays into what is sometimes a weakness of mine, and creates it into a strength there, just like I feel like at Kapalua. And these are all the approach shots, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shots around the green, you just need more imagination, field putting, all that. But in the approach shot specifically, I think that it takes what's sometimes a weakness of mine and turns it into a strength, whereas some people might have a lot harder time lining up so wide and trusting that a hill or a wind or whatever will throw a ball back. It's why I think the Open Championship too, even though you have more flat lies, the wind plays such a role. I like seeing big curves. I don't create big curves that often, and so I think it does play into a strength in that regard.
Awesome insights. Look, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about 16, but not about the misstep over the final 9 holes at Augusta. To me, golf is the ultimate game of recovery. And Jordan Spieth showed me who Jordan Spieth was there by what you did at Colonial just a little while after that, where you birdied 6 of your last 9 holes, I think it was, to come back and win. After, arguably, I guess you can talk to it more than me, suffering what was a heart-wrenching loss at Augusta. Let's talk about the bounce back, please, because there's something to be learned there.
Yeah, sure. I think I thought it was important. I was playing pretty well at the time. I was hitting it really poorly in the spring, summer in 16. Um, but I thought it was obviously very important just mentally to try to get back in the winner's circle as soon as possible, especially, trying to close something out. And, I had a bit of fortune. I chipped in, but I had a couple nice birdies as well on that back nine, as you mentioned, at Colonial, and got a win at one of my favorite places in the hometown event. And to me, that felt pretty special. I think, I needed to kind of get over the hump in a regular event and close one out after just to kind of, not even for myself, but just to kind of get everything else off my back.
Yeah.
Um, and then I thought the Open in 17 was one where I did it in a major where, I kind of forced my way into the stack, the cards being against me again on the back nine with some mistakes, and then was able to have space and time to turn it around. And that helped because I felt like, I went ahead and closed, like truly closed out a major there, more so than I had in the previous 2 that I had won. So I think a combination of Colonial along with the Open the next year was nice, at least mentally, just to, I'd won a few tournaments in between as well, but the Open was just to win the Open in general. But the way it happened, and I think, to just kind of continue to believe in myself as somebody who can close and throw some fireworks at the end and stuff. I think that helped a lot.
I think you say something that's so important there that I want to camp on a little bit. Obviously, you kept the train rolling there and you had won the Masters, you had won the US Open at Chambers Bay. This was 17 in the Open. And, it was nip and tuck there with Kuchar coming down the stretch. And then you had that wide tee ball on 13. And everyone will talk about, a couple of holes later where you pointed at Michael and you're like, go get that. And that was kind of the meme moment. But to me, I remember watching the footage. I was back home here in the States. And here's you and Grella with the presence of mind to take your time there where the ball was well out of position and you figured out something. Where to me, so many golfers watching this who want to get better, it's like getting comfortable when you're uncomfortable, right? And you're in the ultimate of uncomfortable there, but you have the presence of mind and you take the time enough to make the smart decision and you get out there on 13 with what was almost a miraculous save in many ways. So talk about that.
Yeah, I hit it over there and it was kind of in a bush. I knew I couldn't play it. And so I'm just kind of running through my head, what are my options? I go back to the tee. I get to club lengths or I take line of sight with the pin. I'm looking in line of sight with the pin. I'm like, all these trailers are there. So with a rules official, the whole thing took too long. But in my head, I was operating quickly. It was just trying to figure out, I had to take a drop from the drop, make sure that, so I said, are the trailers or is the scenarios ran through my head pretty quickly, actually. Like, all right, well, I'll take line of sight because if the driving range isn't out of bounds and I can drop it over there, I have a clean lie. And wherever I hit that next shot's better than re-teeing.
Yeah.
I'm going to be within 30, 40 yards of the green, regardless where that is. I can hit that one closer than trying to hit, 2 shots up there on one of the more difficult holes that day. And And so I hit a 3-iron and I kind of missed my line a little. My reaction was like, oh no, I just kind of mishit it a smidge to the right. So I knew it wasn't going to have enough distance. Had no idea exactly where it was going to end up. And the save was really nice. And I actually was walking to the next hole and, I'd lost the lead with 5 to go. And I remember going into to use the restroom in the portalet.
Right.
And I remember actually being in there and being like, all right, look, you lost it, but you're only down 1. There's nobody else around. It's just him that you're playing against. And you can beat him by 2 shots on these last 5 holes. When we talk about some of my best stretches of golf I've ever played, the summer of 2017 was a ridiculous stretch of golf for me. I mean, I was finishing first or second, taking 3 weeks off, winning the Open, finishing another, losing the playoff, finishing second. Like there was maybe 6 or 7 events where 5 or 6 of those I finished second or first in a row. So in other words, my confidence level in my game was not thrown off by one tee shot that I hit.
Exactly.
It was, I'm playing really well. It started to rain a little. I made a mistake, not committing to a shot, caught a little water ball. This is what I'm telling myself in my head, whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. Let's step up and hit a good iron shot and just try to have a putt to win each hole. And I remember thinking about that all while I'm in there. And I stepped out of there and I probably hit the best shot I would say that I've ever hit to this day. It was the 6-iron I hit on 14.
Yeah.
And once I won that hole, I said, I got this guy, and the rest is history.
In a weird sort of a way, it's like you manifest destiny. And that's what's cool about it, because again, folks who've ever watched Jordan play, you get this look about you, and it's almost to me like the Tom Brady sets in, and then you just go about doing what you got to do, and you're not ahead, you're not behind, you're just right where you are, and that's so crucial to good golf.
Yeah, I think just having experienced a lot of stuff by that time, experience helps you kind of create those perspectives. And I just, stuff's going to happen. Stuff can happen. It can be clean, but when stuff happens, what's the point in dragging it on if you still have more holes left, right? So the 16 Masters, I got to 13T, and Smiley Kaufman will tell you, I asked him, he made a 2 and I made a 7. And we got to the tee and I said, whose tee is it, to Smiley? When I got to 13T. And he was shocked. He had no idea what to even say. And my point in even saying that is like, look, I mean, it happened. I have 6 holes left, or 6 holes left. I can play him a few under and have a chance to win. I think I played him 2 maybe. And I did have a chance to win. And so even, it wasn't just at the Open there. I had experienced stuff like that where it's like, look, stuff happened. What are you going to do? And if you still have golf left, then you may as well be trying to hit every shot where you're looking and every putt where you're looking, just like I just tried to before. It didn't work out, but doesn't mean it won't now. So, I mean, you just got to, simplifying things to where if you can, this was before, I struggled for a couple of years and I actually really learned what it was like to get out of kind of ego driven golf and into kind of mastery driven golf, and what that meant, how to define that, and how to work that into my life and golf. And but I felt like the bigger the moment, the bigger kind of the potential to go one way, I kind of was able to always calm myself down, the uncomfortable get more comfortable in a weird way. It worked once, it didn't work another time, but and I've had plenty of times in between where it's just the game. So, you can, sometimes I'll play really, really well and on the back end of something and it doesn't work out. Sometimes I'll play a little less good and I win. It just depends on how the other guys around you did.
Yeah. I love that ego driven versus mastery driven. Okay. You touched on the slump. I think there are lessons to be learned there, because through it all, you're awfully poised with the media all the time, because kind of you're one of the stars of the tour, and then you wouldn't play well, and the first thing you get is a microphone in front of your face from guys like me, because we got our jobs to do. But through it all, you were poised, you were awfully loyal, you stuck to your guns, and I just watched a guy sort of almost chart his course back to where he had to be. So I want you to advise, please, the viewer and the listener, because when we start slumping, most people start clutching at straws and just trying any old thing, and one almost sells oneself out at times. But again, you remain true to who you are. So I'd love your commentary, please.
I think during the 2018, I finished 31st in the FedEx. I was playing all right to start the season, but it just kind of got worse and worse. And, I can speak to what I was thinking at the time, and I can speak to what actually was happening now. And what I thought at the time was that, I'd overdone something in the swing and I'll just bounce it back like any other time period. And um, I I was getting frustrated. I was putting really poorly. I think I finished like 200th in putting in 2018, and now I know mechanically what got off that then led to the kind of mental struggles that come with it.
Hmm.
Um, and I just remember kind of going into the fall of 18 thinking, oh, I got a time to fix it. And it actually continued to kind of things got worse until January of 2021. So COVID actually kind of bought me some struggle time in a weird way. But I didn't fix things or plot a chart back. I thought I was all the time. I probably worked harder than any time when I was playing well because it was so frustrating. I just wanted to get to the bottom of things and be who I know I am. And what ended up really happening was a lot of probably can't blame one thing, but I hurt my hand really poorly, really badly training. And I didn't think much of it, but I would go to my lesson with Cameron and he would say, look, your grip's too weak now. You had a weaker grip. You don't have room to go any weaker. But when I would strengthen it, it would be fine. And I'd get to a 4-iron and then I couldn't do it and it would hurt too bad.
All right.
And so I'd say, look, I can't do it. Let's just swing from here. And I think that the mistake I made and possibly a little bit on Cameron there is, well, you can't do this. You have to fix this before you go further. If he were to say that, it's a tough position for him. So for me, if I was more mature, I would have said, let's not push this. Let's figure out what's actually wrong here and get on top of it and take some time to figure it out. And so I played with an unbelievably weak grip in 18, 19 with the face super open.
Hmm.
And so what ends up happening is you end up having to back up out of shots in order to give yourself time to flip. And for somebody who used to be chicken wing hold, and very stable face,
Yeah.
to go from that to an open face and having to kind of back out of things and flip, I could do it well for 2 or maybe even 3 rounds just off athleticism, hand-eye coordination. But over the course of 72 holes, I'm going to have a number of shots that are just out of control. And what was tough here is it was kind of so off that I shouldn't have been able to make many cuts. And I was able to make cuts like in 2019. I remember I went from 200th in putting or whatever it was in 2018 to like second in 2019.
Right.
I turned that around, but I was hitting it even worse and didn't really have many answers. And I was in the final group with Brooks at Bethpage of all places in the PGA. So I'm having like these chances each year. I had a chance in 18 to win the Masters, 19 at the PGA. But I'm going to the first tee and I'm like, this guy's on top of his game. I know what it feels like to be on top of your game and to be confident going to the first tee and excited. And I'm sitting here going, I don't know when something's going to happen, but something's going to happen. And I can try and save it with putting, but I finished third and it's like, oh, I finished third in a major, but played poorly on the weekend. It's like, no, I just happened to like hole a shot Thursday or Friday and like get the right number a few times and make 4 30-footers. And the toughest part was when I would finish well, it would make it seem like things were okay when they weren't. And I knew they weren't. I mean, I know what it's supposed to feel like. And I couldn't get it to where it was feeling the right way. And it was, so I started actually taking a full approach, taking a step back, taking a full approach in the winter of 2020 into 21. And I started working with this company called NeuroPeak.
Yes.
And it was advised by Troy Van Beason. You probably, if you watch the quarterback series on Netflix, you'd see Kirk Cousins was somebody that's been using it.
Well, they've recently been on my show just for the
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
It's excellent stuff.
So I started working with them in December of 2020. And I went in and I missed the cut, still playing poorly in 2021 at San Diego. And that was probably rock bottom for me. I had tears. I didn't know, it was just another start to another season. And I know I'm trying to do the right things now, taking control mentally, talking to people, putting in some work, to try and help kind of get out of fight or flight, to do some breathing, to kind of introduce some of that meditation stuff. And it just, I was like, man, I'm looking to get off to a good start, and I just didn't. By the Saturday of the next week, I shot 61 and was in the final group in Phoenix.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so when you say you saw taken steps, it's funny because yes, since then I believe I have, but it wasn't like I took a really good step in what I was doing there. But that week, Cameron came in and I had to strengthen my grip. I talked with Jason Duffner, who has been a very big influence, positive influence on how to help the feel side of things. You know, a lot of times as an instructor, as you probably know, you can instruct all you want, but you can't get in a player's mind on how something's feeling. And that's the most difficult separation. And so to kind of have somebody who I knew really well and trusted come in and say, look, you know, it should feel like this. This is what you did well. Don't even worry about it looking this way. It doesn't matter. As long as you're doing this into impact and it feels like this in impact, then you're going to be in a better place. And to me, that was that face turns down, that shaft's leaning, and you're cleared out and you're on your left side. Just those things. Don't even care. Try and pass it back, keep it in front of you going back, but then just, it doesn't really matter. You know, I was so video obsessed for a few years.
Okay.
Why does this not look like it does here? I'm trying this. How can I not match up to any degree what it looked like in 2015 or 2017 or 2013, whatever? And that got me out of that. So it got me impact focused, ball flight focused. I had just strengthened my grip to allow me to actually have the face in a better place, which is a very hard thing to do the week of a tournament.
Yeah, I'll say.
I'm talking a 5-degree plus grip change.
Okay, wait,
the
I
week
want
of
to
the
stop you.
tournament.
Yeah, I want to stop you there because look, your insight is fantastic, but I'm thinking ahead here. And then when you eventually, after 1,000-something days, it was all documented, you show up there at the Valero Texas Open, and that place is single file in places. And if you miss fairways, it's desert and cactus and rocks and stuff in Austin. I can imagine what it's like after now you've been on all that stuff in the rear view. Now you're coming down the stretch and you win and you hit the shots coming down the stretch there. So was that like, man, I can imagine the apprehension and I've got to trust this, but whoa, there's so much sensory overload. It must have been challenging.
Sure. And I wore off some of the scar tissue prior to it being April by contending in Phoenix. First hole with a hybrid on Sunday, I hit over in the rocks. I make bogey with a hybrid off the tee. You know, Bay Hill. I'm contending at Bay Hill. It's the first time I've ever played Bay Hill. Talk about a place that's heavy stress.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I mean, Riviera, I contended the next week after Phoenix. Pebble Beach after Phoenix, I contended. So there's 3 weeks where I hadn't really contended in a long time, really since 2019. And then I go into Bay Hill and you know, I have a couple shots where on Sunday it's like I had a chance, and you know, so the scar tissue wore off. I start learning a little bit. I start playing the right shots. The where my vision starts getting a little bit more narrowed, and then all of a sudden, you know, it all works out there in San Antonio.
Tremendous. Okay, you've been so great with your time. I have so many questions still. This is fascinating for me, and I'm loving it. I want to ask this because, you know, when one's going through changes as you did, you had that practice rehearsal, that rehearsal swing, which to me was very purpose driven, and everyone was like, "What's Jordan doing?" I feel like there's so much to be learned when you want to get to your fields that you and Duffner were talking about. That practice swing was driven with that in mind. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Also, just trying to get the backswing to a place that allowed the downswing to feel better and better and better. So yeah, it was you know, I still have some of it today, but it's very different. It's not the same idea. It's just fine tuning kind of the end of the backswing to kind of keep everything on top of the hands in plane to where what I didn't have then, which was off speed draws. Anything that I wanted to hit had to be either a cut or a really hard hit shot, and really getting all the shots back in the arsenal.
Okay, so just a few quick hits here. I've asked you about the feels. Jordan Spieth's belief to playing the game well. Is there such a thing? I mean, can you encapsulate it like that?
Having fun and having freedom. So having they kind of go hand in hand, but having freedom to me is I know what I'm doing. I'm stepping onto the tee, and between the swing and the putting stroke, I don't feel like I have to save anything. So feeling in front of, feeling like the tempo gets me in front of, slotted. So freedom to me leads to having fun, and both of those together just lead to playing good golf.
You're Hall of Fame bound. You have an incredible career. You're on the doorstep of the Grand Slam as well. You've been through it all. It's been like a roller coaster. The train was rolling, there was a roller coaster. Now you're kind of back in the saddle to me. Um, if you look back, is there anything you know for sure? I mean, what do you go, right? I'm writing this in my memoirs one day where I'm telling Sammy, this is kind of what I know for certain.
Um, I think I still maybe a few things, but it's still I still have to think that I've got a lot to learn.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. Um, with
I
putting,
think the number one thing is that it's not the critic who counts. No offense.
amen, brother.
I mean, I think the number one thing is, what I mean, even in 2015 or so, I remember trying to work on things based on what I had heard people say that I didn't know was a weapon of mine and was talked about almost negatively. And I think I actually could have won more golf tournaments that year that I was trying to do the wrong things versus like the opposite of what I know was successful about what I was doing. It's bizarre, swing it like Adam Scott. Well, I didn't. And it's like, well, actually, what I was doing was what people are trying to do now. It's funny.
Hey, I've been in plenty of conversation as a recovering golf instructor with other pundits who would be those folks who would say, well, Jordan needs to do this to get better. I'm like, golly. Anyways, with putting, those pressure putts, you used to be as at the hole almost all the time. And then you went away from it. Now I see you kind of vacillating. What's your take over there?
Yeah, I think it just kind of depends on, if I feel like I'm not needing to be very mechanic oriented, then I'm good, picking a spot in front of the ball or whatever. But if I've been more mechanically oriented, I like looking because it takes me out of it on shorter range putts and just be more athletic.
Mm. Again, Jordan Spieth with a wedge in his hand is something that I dream about. Um, the I also watch you when you're chipping and pitching and stuff. Are you bound to one wedge? I mean, is there like a go-to? Is there the playmaker, or do you vary around greens?
I use a 60 degree almost all the time. If it's a bump and run from long distance or a long distance bunker shot, I hit my 52 degree. I don't chip with my 56 degree. I maybe hit one chip or two chips ever professionally with a 56. And they would have been if there was like a rock under because if I because I didn't want to damage one of the other two.
Okay, last one. This is from my daughter Isabel. She's a fan naturally, and I said to her, "Look, I'm talking with Jordan," and she's like, "Oh, really?" I said, "Anything you want to ask him?" And she said, "I'd love to know how Jordan manages his emotions and the expectations before a round, given who you are."
It's a great question.
Oh, I should
Um,
have had her do the interview.
yeah. I go through a very similar routine. It doesn't matter when the tee time is, doesn't matter what day it is. I think you go through the same routine and you fall into a good rhythm then. And that means when I arrive at the course, what I'm doing, physio, gym, and then when I'm showing up, how I'm doing my actual practice prior to the round. The expectations a lot of times depend on where I am realistic about where I'm at. They're always probably too high for myself. That's better than being too low. Um, I don't feel like I ever exceed them in a round, possibly if I get a couple good breaks but most of the time I've got a good gauge on where I'm at. And so I've got a good feel on how to manage those expectations, but they're all internal. They're all about me. They're not anything coming from anyone else anymore. And it's quite simply, I know that my ceiling at each part of my game has been top 10 in the world. I've been a top 10 driver. I've been a top 10 iron player. I've been a top. So I believe that if I can be as close to my ceiling at every part of the game, then I don't believe I can be beaten if I'm playing that way. And I've proven that. It's happened before, which makes it easier to believe that. And so it's all about continuing to try to work towards that, where my ceiling is. And sometimes, one part of it's hard to have it all there. That only comes together even for someone like Tiger. He'd probably tell you he only had it all there a few times in his career. But the point is if you believe that ceiling's higher than those around you and you keep pushing to get to it, that's how I'm satisfied.
Jordan Spieth, this has been thrilling. Thank you. I've kept you out of your parental routine, so I'll let you go. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you joining us.
Got it, Mark. Absolutely.